The diplomatic reception hall buzzed with quiet conversations between species from across the galaxy. David Reed adjusted his collar and tried to focus on the trade agreements being discussed around him. 3 months as Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, and he still felt out of place among beings who had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. A tall insectoid delegate clicked its mandibles at him, attempting what passed for a smile among the chitin species. David nodded politely and moved toward the refreshment table. Through the massive windows, he could see dozens of ships docked at the station's ports. Some were elegant crystalline vessels that seemed to grow rather than be built. Others were brutal military craft with weapons visible on every surface. The doors at the far end of the hall opened with a hiss. Conversation died instantly. 6 Krellian soldiers marched inside wearing black armor that seemed to absorb light. Their reptilian faces showed no emotion as they formed 2 lines. Behind them came Captain Vask, a massive figure whose scales were darker than the others, crisscrossed with scars that spoke of decades of combat. David had read the reports about Krellians: militaristic, aggressive. They had conquered 40 systems in the past century, always finding legal loopholes in council regulations. But they had never directly threatened human colonies, until last month. Vask stopped in the center of the hall. His yellow eyes swept across the gathered diplomats like a predator counting prey. When he spoke, his voice carried the growling quality common to his species. Esteemed council members, the Krellian Empire brings tribute to resolve recent territorial disputes with the human expansion zone. David felt his stomach tighten. Tribute. Humans had filed complaints about Krellian ships harassing colony transports, but there had been no formal disputes, nothing that required tribute. Vask gestured to his soldiers. They stepped aside. 12 children walked through the doorway, human children. David's world narrowed to that single image. The youngest looked maybe 5 years old, clutching the hand of an older girl who couldn't be more than 14. They wore clothes that had once been colorful but were now torn and filthy. Several had visible bruises. One boy limped badly, favoring his left leg. A girl near the back had her arm wrapped in makeshift bandages that were stained with old blood. The children's eyes were empty. David had seen that look before, in war zones and disaster areas. The look of people who had given up hope. These young ones were found in disputed space, Vask continued, his tone casual, as if discussing cargo shipments. Aboard vessels that violated Krellian territorial boundaries. We have maintained them for 3 standard weeks while determining proper protocols. Maintained them, as if they were equipment. David forced himself to breathe slowly, to think. His hands were shaking, so he clasped them behind his back. Around the hall, other diplomats shifted uncomfortably. The Lumini ambassador, a being of living crystal, dimmed its natural glow. Several delegates from smaller species found urgent reasons to study their data tablets. No one spoke. The youngest child started crying, a soft broken sound that cut through the silence like a knife. The older girl holding his hand knelt down and whispered something to him. She was trying to comfort him even though her own face showed fresh bruises. David recognized her from the missing persons reports. Sophie Martinez, age 7, taken from the farming colony on New Houston along with 11 others when Krellian raiders hit the settlement. The official report said there were no survivors. The colony had been destroyed, the buildings burned. Earth had assumed the children died in the attack. They had been wrong. The Krellian Empire offers these assets as settlement for territorial claims, Vask said. He was enjoying this. David could see it in the way the reptilians' eyes gleamed. We have fed them, sheltered them. We expect appropriate compensation for their care. Assets, he called them assets. David's training took over. Years of diplomatic service, learning to maintain composure in crisis situations, keeping his voice level even when every instinct screamed to act. He stepped forward, aware that every eye in the room was now on him. "Captain Vask," he said quietly, "those are children, human children who were taken from a colony world in violation of a dozen interstellar laws." Vask's mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile among his kind. "Laws are subject to interpretation, Ambassador Reed. The children were in disputed territory. They are now Krellian property under salvage regulations." Property? David looked at the children again. The boy with the limp was maybe 10, Marcus Webb from the reports. He had tried to fight the raiders when they came. David could see the defiance still burning somewhere deep in those traumatized eyes, buried but not quite extinguished. "Return the children," David said. His voice was still calm, but something in his tone made several nearby diplomats step back. "Now." Vask laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Or what human? Your species has been part of the Council for mere decades. You have 60 colony worlds scattered across 30 light years. The Krellian Empire spans 400 worlds. We field 10,000 warships. Your entire species owns perhaps 300 military vessels." He spread his clawed hands wide. "You are in no position to make demands." David held the Krellian's gaze. "I am asking, Captain, not demanding, return the children to human custody, immediately. And if we refuse, then I request 48 hours before any further discussion." David kept his voice perfectly level, professional, diplomatic. Vask studied him for a long moment, then laughed again. 48 hours, to do what? Send angry messages, file complaints, soft mammals. You lack the spine for real action." David turned away without responding. He walked past the other delegates, past the crystalline Lumini who watched with its alien eyes, past the insectoid chitin ambassador who clicked something that might have been sympathy or contempt. He ignored them all. In his private quarters, David accessed his secure communication terminal. His hands were steady now. He typed a single message, encrypted with codes known only to a handful of people on Earth. "Protocol Shepard ACTIVATED. 12 confirmed. Location VERIFIED. Request immediate authorization." The response came within 90 seconds. "Authorized, full discretion granted. Bring them home." David closed the channel and sat in the darkness of his room. Through the window, he could see stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were already moving. Fleets that had been scattered across colony space for months, positioned under the guise of patrol rotations and training exercises. Protocol Shepard had been planned for years, a contingency that Earth's military leaders hoped they would never need to implement. A response so overwhelming that it only made sense in one specific scenario: when someone hurt human children. The Krellian Empire had 400 worlds and 10,000 ships. They had conquered dozens of species. They believed themselves untouchable. They were about to learn differently. David looked at his reflection in the dark window. In 48 hours, the galaxy would see what humans became when someone crossed the only line that truly mattered. He just hoped the children would survive long enough to be saved. The emergency session of the Galactic Council began exactly 12 hours after Captain Vask displayed the human children. Representatives from 87 species filled the circular chamber, their voices creating a chaos of different languages and communication methods. Translators worked overtime to convert clicks, whistles, telepathic pulses, and spoken words into something approaching coherent discussion. Ambassador Reed sat in the human delegation's assigned seat and said nothing. He simply watched. The chitin ambassador, a massive insectoid whose carapace gleamed under the chamber lights, raised several of its 6 limbs for attention. When the room quieted, it spoke through its translator device. "This situation is regrettable. However, we must consider the broader implications. The Krellian Empire controls significant trade routes. Open conflict would destabilize the entire sector's economy. Several species clicked or hummed or flashed their agreement. The Lumini observer floated near the chamber's center, its crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns. Unlike most species, the Lumini never took sides in council debates. They simply observed and occasionally offered insights. When it spoke, its voice resonated like wind chimes. Curious patterns emerge in human-controlled space: ship movements, energy signatures, large-scale mobilization masked as routine operations. Every delegate turned to look at David. He met their gazes without expression. A representative from the Thorn Collective, an ancient species that rarely spoke, leaned forward. Its voice crackled like dry leaves. "Ambassador Reed, your government's intentions." "We intend to recover our children," David said simply. "By what means?" "Whatever means prove necessary." The chamber erupted in debate. Some species argued for intervention to prevent conflict. Others insisted the council had no jurisdiction over internal disputes. A few suggested mediating negotiations between humans and Krellians. David listened to them discuss the children's fate as if it were an abstract problem to be solved through committee meetings and trade agreements. He thought about Sophie Martinez crying in that hall, about Marcus Webb's defiant eyes despite everything done to him, about 12 kids who asked for water and got broken bones instead. The debate continued for 3 more hours. Then reports started coming in. Human ships were appearing at Krellian border systems. Not dozens, hundreds. Military vessels, yes, but also civilian transports that had been retrofitted with missile pods, mining craft carrying kinetic weapons, even passenger liners equipped with defensive systems that suddenly looked very offensive. The Chiton ambassador demanded explanations. David provided none. 10 light-years away, Dr. James Park stepped off a diplomatic shuttle onto the Krellian throne world. He was 60 years old, slightly built, with gray hair and the calm demeanor of someone who had spent decades in academic research. He wore simple civilian clothes and carried only a data tablet. Krellian guards escorted him through streets lined with statues celebrating military victories. The architecture was brutal and efficient, all sharp angles and dark stone. Citizens stopped to stare at the human walking freely in their capital city. Some laughed, others looked confused. The throne hall was exactly what James expected: massive, intimidating, designed to make visitors feel small and powerless. Warlord Draxus sat on a raised platform surrounded by his military commanders. He was larger than Vask, his scales almost black, with eyes that held the cold calculation of someone who had never lost a war. "The human academic," Draxus said, his voice filled the chamber. "You requested this audience, speak." James activated his data tablet. Holographic images appeared in the air between them. Medical scans, photographs, video recordings. "This is Sophie Martinez," James said quietly. "Age 7. She was taken from New Houston Colony 23 days ago. These scans show 3 fractured ribs, a broken ulna, and extensive soft tissue damage consistent with repeated physical trauma." He swiped to another image. "She asked her captors for water. They broke her arm for speaking without permission." The Krellian commanders shifted slightly. Draxus remained motionless. James continued through the files. Marcus Webb with internal bleeding. A 6-year-old named Amy with cigarette burns on her arms. 10-year-old brothers who had been beaten unconscious for trying to protect the younger children. "I am not here to negotiate," James said. "I am here to deliver a message. You have 24 hours to return every child, alive and medically treated, to human custody." Draxus leaned forward. Or my species will remove them by force." The warlord's laugh echoed off the stone walls. His commanders joined in, a chorus of predatory amusement. When the sound faded, Draxus gestured at the holographic displays showing Krellian military might. 400 worlds lit up in red, 10,000 warship positions marked in space. Your species has existed in this galaxy for barely a century. You have no allies among the Council species. You field 300 military vessels against our 10,000. You occupy 60 colony worlds that we could reduce to ash within days. Draxus stood, his full height emphasizing the threat. You negotiate from no position of strength, human. James packed his data tablet. We are not negotiating, we are warning you. You have built your empire by conquering species who fought according to established galactic conventions, who followed rules of engagement, who valued their own survival above all else. He turned toward the exit. We do not follow those rules, not for this. You would start a war over 12 children. James stopped. He looked back at the warlord, and for just a moment, something showed in his eyes that made several Krellian commanders reach for their weapons. Warlord Draxus, we would end a civilization over 12 children. The question is whether you believe us. He left without waiting for a response. The first reports reached Draxus within an hour. Human fleets had crossed into Krellian border space, not just at one point, everywhere. Simultaneous incursions across 17 different systems. A border patrol fleet of 200 Krellian ships moved to intercept a human force near the mining world of Forge 3. The Krellian commander sent the standard demand for withdrawal. The human response was a data transmission. Medical files, images of the 12 children, names, ages, documented injuries. Then a single message: these are our reasons, what are yours? The battle lasted 43 minutes. The Krellian force had superior numbers and firepower. They should have won easily. Instead, they barely escaped with 37 ships intact. Human tactics made no sense. Ships fought past the point of structural failure. Damaged vessels rammed Krellian cruisers instead of retreating. Fighter pilots made impossible attack runs that killed them but crippled enemy flagships. The surviving Krellian commander sent his report with shaking claws. They fight like they want to die, like they care more about hurting us than surviving. I have never seen anything like it. More reports flooded in. Human forces engaging across multiple systems, winning battles they should lose, taking casualties that would break any rational military force but somehow maintaining cohesion. In the council chamber, the Lumini observer spoke again. Assessment revision required. This is not military action. This is extermination protocol. The Chiton ambassador turned to David, who still sat quietly in his seat. Ambassador Reed, your forces are suffering significant casualties. Surely negotiation would be preferable to this bloodshed. David finally stood. You keep using that word, negotiation, as if the children are bargaining chips, as if their suffering is a position we might compromise on. He looked around the chamber. There is nothing to negotiate. Return the children or we continue until the Krellian Empire no longer exists. Those are the only two outcomes. That is genocide. No, David said softly. That is consequence. Genocide is what happens to defenseless populations. The Krellian Empire is a military power that made a choice. They are experiencing the results of that choice. He sat back down and resumed his silence, while the galaxy watched humans demonstrate exactly what they became when someone hurt their children. The first Krellian core system fell 16 hours after James Park delivered his warning. Human ships secured the orbital space, disabled the defense platforms, and broadcast a simple message to the population below. Your leaders took our children. We want them back. End this now. 3 Krellian core systems burned, while Warlord Draxus tried to understand what was happening to his empire. The tactical displays in his war room showed red indicators spreading like a disease across Krellian space. Each red marker represented a human fleet engaging his forces. But the numbers made no sense. Explain this again, Draxus growled at his intelligence commander. Slowly. The commander, A younger Krellian named Vorth manipulated the holographic display. The humans had approximately 300 military vessels according to our intelligence. Current counts show over 2,000 ships in active combat operations. Where did they come from? Civilian vessels, warlord, cargo haulers, mining ships, colony transports, even passenger liners. They retrofitted anything that could mount a weapon or serve as a kinetic missile. Draxus studied the display. The human ships were marked in blue. They swarmed around Krellian positions like insects, coordinating attacks that seemed suicidal but somehow achieved objectives. What are our casualty rates? Vorth hesitated. 40% of engaged forces. But warlord, the humans are losing twice as many ships. Their casualty rates are unsustainable. Then why do they keep coming? No one in the war room had an answer. Fleet Commander Rita Hayes stood on the bridge of the civilian transport carrier Morning Sun, watching the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Her ship had once carried supplies to farming colonies. Now it carried missile pods and a crew of volunteers who knew exactly why they were here. A Krellian battle group appeared on sensors, 12 warships, heavily armed, moving to intercept. The communications officer looked at Rita with worried eyes. They are demanding our surrender, Commander. Rita touched a control on her console. Images appeared on every screen across the bridge. Sophie Martinez with her bandaged arm, Marcus Webb with bruises covering his face, Amy with the cigarette burns. Send them this, Rita said, then send them our answer. The Krellian commander received the transmission. Medical files, names, ages, documented abuse, then a simple message. This is Sophie. She is 7 years old. She asked for water. They broke her arm. This is Marcus. He tried to protect the younger ones. They beat him until he could not stand. This is Amy. She is 6. Those burns on her arms, someone thought it was funny. The message continued with details about each child, what had been done to them, how long they suffered. Then the final line. You are defending the people who did this. We are here to stop them. Choose your side. 3 Krellian ships broke formation and withdrew from the battle group. Their commanders had families, children of their own. The thought of defending people who tortured kids made something crack in their military discipline. The remaining 9 ships opened fire. Rita gave the order to engage. Morning Sun was not built for combat. It had armor in all the wrong places and weapons that had been bolted on by dock workers who learned from instruction videos. But it had something the Krellian ships did not expect. A crew that genuinely did not care if they survived. They only cared about making the enemy pay. Rita watched her people work with terrifying efficiency. They took hits that should have destroyed them and kept fighting. When the weapons failed, they rammed enemy ships. When the engines died, they used maneuvering thrusters to position themselves as obstacles that disrupted Krellian formations. The battle lasted 20 minutes. Morning Sun broke apart in the final exchange, its hull splitting along stress fractures that had been ignored in the rush to get combat ready. Rita saw the emergency lights flash red, felt the gravity fail, knew they had seconds before the air vented completely. Her last transmission was simple. Tell Earth we held the line. Tell those kids we tried. Then Morning Sun detonated its remaining fuel reserves inside the Krellian flagship's hangar bay. The Galactic Council watched in horrified fascination as humans demonstrated a complete disregard for conventional military logic. Species that had fought wars for thousands of years could not comprehend the tactical decisions being made. The Thorn Collective Elder spoke during another emergency session. We have witnessed 10,000 conflicts across our civilization's history. Never have we observed a species employing total war doctrine over 12 individuals. David Reed had not left the council chamber in 30 hours. He looked tired but utterly unmoved by the mounting casualty reports. Then you have never encountered a species worth preserving. Children are not expendable. They are not negotiable. They are not acceptable losses in political calculations. But your own casualties are catastrophic, the Chiton ambassador protested. Thousands dead, entire ships sacrificed, economic damage that will take decades to repair, all for 12 lives. David's response was quiet, but everyone in the chamber heard it clearly. Every single person in those ships volunteered, every captain, every crew member, every civilian who helped retrofit those vessels. They knew the risks, they understood the costs, and they went anyway because that is who we are. That is madness. No, that is civilization, real civilization, the kind that protects its most vulnerable members no matter what it costs. Admiral Grace Thompson received the casualty reports in her command center on Earth. The numbers were brutal. 200 ships destroyed, thousands dead, entire families wiped out when civilian vessels were lost. She felt each death like a physical blow. These were her people, her responsibility. But when her officers asked if they should consider pulling back, she thought about Sophie Martinez asking for water and getting a broken arm instead. "Continue operations," she ordered. "All fleets maintain engagement." The officer hesitated. "Admiral, at this rate we will exhaust our available forces within 72 hours. Then we have 72 hours to make the Krellian Empire understand that harming human children carries a price they cannot afford to pay." She pulled up the tactical display showing human forces spread across Krellian space like a tightening noose. Each blue marker represented people who chose to be there, who volunteered for missions they knew might kill them. Because 12 children mattered. In Krellian space, something unexpected began happening. Patrol ships started refusing orders. Crews mutinied. Entire squadrons broke formation and withdrew from combat zones. Some transmitted messages explaining their actions. Others simply disappeared into the void. Warlord Draxus received reports of internal fractures spreading through his forces, commanders questioning orders, soldiers asking why they were defending child abusers. The questions spread like poison through his ranks. A junior officer named Tesk stood in the facility where the 12 human children were being held. He had been assigned to guard duty, a position considered safe and easy. Just watch some prisoners. Nothing complicated. But Tesk had 3 offspring of his own back on the homeworld, young ones who still needed protection, who still trusted adults to keep them safe. He looked at the human children through the observation window. Sophie sat in the corner, her bandaged arm held carefully. Marcus tried to comfort the younger ones even though he could barely move from his own injuries. They were terrified, broken, traumatized. And they were just kids. Tesk made a decision that would change everything. He accessed the security systems and began planning something his military training never prepared him for. He was going to commit treason. Because some orders should not be followed. Some causes were worth betraying your own government. The children needed help, and if his own empire would not provide it, then he would. Tesk waited until the night shift started before making his move. The facility holding the human children sat in a remote location outside the capital city, a converted military warehouse that few people knew existed. Perfect for hiding prisoners the government wanted to keep secret. He had studied the security protocols for 6 hours, memorizing guard rotations and camera positions. His claws trembled slightly as he entered override codes into the security panel. One mistake and alarms would sound. He would be arrested. His family would suffer the consequences of his treason. But every time doubt crept into his mind, he remembered looking through that observation window, remembered 12 terrified faces, remembered his own offspring safe at home while these children suffered for political games. The locks disengaged with soft clicks. Tesk entered the holding area. The children were awake despite the late hour, probably too afraid to sleep. When they saw him, they scrambled backward, pressing themselves against the far wall. Their fear was obvious, just another Krellian coming to hurt them. "Please," Sophie whispered, "please do not hit us again, we will be quiet." Something broke inside Tesk's chest. He lowered himself to the floor, making himself smaller, less threatening. "I am not here to hurt you. I am here to take you somewhere safe." The children did not believe him. Why would they? They had learned that promises from people like him meant nothing but pain. Marcus stepped forward, placing himself between Tesk and the younger kids. His eyes held that defiant spark despite the bruises covering his face. "Liar, you are one of them." "Yes," Tesk admitted. "I am Krellian, I serve the Empire, or I did until I saw what we became." He pulled out a small data tablet and showed them something, a picture of his own offspring. "These are my children. Their names are Ves, Cora, and Little Thim. When I look at them, I see you. When I think about someone hurting them the way you have been hurt, I feel." He struggled for the word in their language. "Rage and shame." Sophie looked at the picture. "They are your Bobbies." "Yes. You love them. More than my own life." She studied his face for a long moment. Then slowly she reached out and took his hand. Her small fingers barely wrapped around one of his claws. "Then help us go home, please. We want to go home." Tesk felt moisture in his eyes, something rare for his species. "That is exactly what I am going to do." Getting the children out of the facility proved easier than expected. Security was designed to keep people from breaking in, not to prevent someone with proper clearance from leaving. Within 20 minutes, Tesk had all 12 children loaded into a transport vehicle designed for cargo, not passengers. They huddled together in the back, still afraid but beginning to hope. He drove through the night, heading for the border zones where human forces were advancing. Every checkpoint made his heart race. Every patrol ship overhead sent fear through his system, but his security clearance held. No one questioned a mid-level officer moving supplies during wartime. 3 hours into the journey, Amy started crying. Not from pain this time, but from exhaustion and fear finally breaking through whatever wall she had built to survive. Sophie held her, whispering comforting sounds that transcended language barriers. Marcus sat near Tesk in the front compartment. "Why are you doing this? You will be killed when they find out." "Perhaps, but I will die knowing I did the right thing. That matters more than survival." Tesk glanced at the boy. "You protected the others, even when they hurt you. Why?" "Because someone had to, because they needed me." Marcus looked back at the other children. "That is what you do when someone needs help. You help them, even if it is hard, even if it is scary." "You are very brave for someone so young." "No, I'm just doing what is right, same as you." They reached the border zone as dawn broke. Human ships controlled the orbital space above, having pushed Krellian forces back during the night. Tesk activated his emergency beacon and broadcast on all frequencies. "Human forces, this is Krellian Officer Tesk. I am defecting. I have your 12 children with me. They are alive. They need medical care. Please do not shoot." The response came within seconds. "Officer Tesk, this is Captain Williams of the human destroyer Shield. Transmit your exact coordinates and stand by for verification." Tesk sent the data and waited. His career was over, his life might be as well, but the children were safe. That had to be enough. 3 human ships appeared overhead, moving with careful precision. One landed nearby and armed soldiers emerged, weapons ready. They approached the transport cautiously, clearly expecting a trap. Marcus opened the rear door and stepped out, hands raised. "Do not shoot. He is helping us. He saved us." The soldiers froze at the sight of 12 human children emerging from a Krellian military transport. Their weapons lowered. Several started cursing in relief and disbelief. A medic rushed forward, scanning the children for injuries. Captain Williams approached Tesk, who had exited the vehicle with his hands clearly visible. The human officer was smaller than the Krellian, but carried himself with absolute confidence. You defected, you saved them. Why? Tesk gestured to the children being checked by medics. Because I have children too. Because what was done to them was wrong. Because some orders should not be followed. William studied him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting. Thank you. You just saved more lives than you know. I do not understand. Those kids are why we are here. Why we are burning your empire down. You just gave us the one thing that might stop this war. Williams looked back at the children. Sophie was getting her arm properly treated while Amy received medication for her burns. Marcus stood protectively near the younger ones, finally allowing himself to relax. Broadcast this on every channel, Williams ordered his crew. Full recording, let everyone see. Within an hour, the images spread across Krellian space, Tesk delivering the children, human medics treating their injuries with gentle care, Marcus explaining how the Krellian officer risked everything to save them. And most importantly, Tesk's own words broadcast to his entire species. I served evil. I will serve it no more. These are children. We have dishonored ourselves by harming them. I choose honor over orders. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for Warlord Draxus. Ships began defecting en masse. Entire fleets stood down. Planets refused to send reinforcements. The Krellian military machine that had conquered 40 systems fractured along moral lines that had nothing to do with tactics or strategy. Because one junior officer looked at 12 suffering children and decided that some things mattered more than loyalty to a corrupt government. In the Galactic Council chamber, David Reed received the news and allowed himself to feel hope for the first time in days. The children were safe. That was all that mattered. But he also knew this was not over, not yet. The medical bay of the human carrier vessel Sanctuary hummed with quiet efficiency. 12 beds held 12 children who were finally safe after 3 weeks of nightmare. Doctors and nurses moved between them, treating injuries that made experienced medical personnel fight back tears. Sophie sat propped up with pillows while a bone regenerator worked on her fractured arm. The device hummed softly, knitting tissue and calcium back together in ways that would have seemed like magic a century ago. She watched the medical staff with wide eyes, still not quite believing that people were being kind to her. A nurse named Patricia brought her something warm to drink, real chocolate, not the synthetic substitutes common on colony worlds. Sophie took the cup with her good hand and sipped carefully. The taste made her start crying again, but this time from relief rather than pain. You are safe now, sweetheart, Patricia said softly. No one is going to hurt you anymore. Promise. I promise. See those ships outside? Patricia pointed to the window where dozens of human vessels maintained formation around the sanctuary. Every single person on every single ship out there volunteered to come get you. You are the most protected children in the entire galaxy right now. Marcus lay in the bed next to Sophie's, his ribs wrapped in regenerative bandaging. He had not said much since the rescue, just lay quietly and stared at the ceiling. The doctors said he was in shock, his mind trying to process everything that had happened. But when Amy started crying from a nightmare, Marcus was out of his bed immediately despite the pain. He sat beside her, holding her hand and humming a song his mother used to sing. The medical staff tried to get him back to bed, but he refused until Amy fell back asleep. Admiral Grace Thompson visited the medical bay 12 hours after the rescue. She moved slowly between the beds, speaking quietly with each child. Not as a military officer, but as a human being who needed to see with her own eyes that they were okay. When she reached Sophie's bed, the little girl looked up at her with questions in her eyes. Are you the boss? Sophie asked. I am in charge of the military forces, yes. People died because of us. The nice lady told me, thousands of people in the ships. Grace knelt beside the bed so she could look Sophie in the eyes at the same level. Yes, People died. Good people who volunteered to come help you. Why? Sophie's voice was tiny. We are just kids. We are not important enough for people to die for. The Admiral felt something crack in her carefully maintained professional composure. Sophie, listen to me very carefully. You are exactly important enough. You and Marcus and Amy and every single child in this room. You are why we do everything. You are why we build civilizations and write laws and sometimes, yes, go to war. Because protecting children is the most important thing adults can do. But so many people died. Those people made a choice. They knew the risks. They went anyway because they believed you were worth saving, and they were right. Grace touched Sophie's good hand gently. You are worth it, every single one of you. Never doubt that. Sophie cried then, really cried for the first time since the rescue. Patricia held her while Grace moved on to the next bed, her own eyes suspiciously bright. In the Krellian capital, Warlord Draxus faced the collapse of everything he had built. Half his military had defected or simply stopped following orders. Entire planets declared independence from the Empire. His own commanders were openly questioning his authority. The war room screens showed human forces not advancing now, just holding positions around Krellian core systems. They were waiting. Everyone could see it. But waiting for what? Commander Vorth approached with the latest intelligence reports. Warlord, the humans have the children. They are safe aboard medical vessels, yet their fleets maintain combat readiness. I do not understand their strategy. Draxus understood perfectly. The humans had what they came for, but they were not leaving. They were making a point, demonstrating that they could have destroyed the Krellian Empire completely if they chose to continue. How many of our worlds have we lost operational control over? Draxus asked. 47 have declared neutrality. 15 have openly joined the rebellion against Central Command. 23 are contested between loyalist and rebel forces. The Empire was tearing itself apart, not because of human military action, but because Tesk's defection had forced every Krellian to confront an uncomfortable question. What kind of civilization tortures children? Many found they could not accept the answer. A transmission came through on the command channel. Ambassador David Reed appeared on the screen, looking tired but satisfied. Behind him, the Galactic Council chamber was visible, packed with representatives from across known space. Warlord Draxus, the 12 children are safe and receiving medical care. Your officer Tesk is under human protection and will not be returned for punishment. We are prepared to cease all military operations against Krellian targets effective immediately. Draxus felt a surge of hope. Peace terms, finally. What are your demands? Not demands. Conditions. First, you will surrender yourself to stand trial at the Galactic Court for crimes against sentient children. Second, the Krellian government will undergo complete restructuring under council oversight. Third, reparations will be paid to the families of all humans killed during this conflict. Fourth, every Krellian officer involved in the abduction or abuse of the children will face justice. And if I refuse? David's expression did not change. Then we resume operations until the Krellian Empire ceases to exist as a functional government. Your people will survive. They will rebuild. But you and everyone like you will not be part of that future. It was not a negotiation. It was a statement of fact. Draxus looked around his war room at the officers who remained loyal, saw the doubt in their eyes, the shame, the growing understanding that they had served a cause that crossed lines no civilization should cross. I need time to consider. You have 6 hours. Then we either receive your surrender or we continue what we started. David leaned forward slightly. Understand something, Warlord. We did not want this war. We wanted our children back safely. Everything that happened, every ship destroyed, every life lost, all of it traces back to a simple decision someone in your government made. They decided 12 human children were acceptable casualties in your political games. He paused, letting that sink in. You learned differently. The galaxy learned differently. Now everyone knows what happens when someone hurts human children. We become something we would rather not be, but we will become it anyway because protecting our young matters more than anything else. More than peace, more than prosperity, more than our own lives. The transmission ended, leaving Draxus alone with his thoughts and the ruins of an empire that had seemed invincible just days ago. Outside the medical bay windows, Sophie watched the stars and thought about home, about her parents who must be so worried, about her little brother who probably did not understand where she went. A hand touched her shoulder gently. Patricia smiled down at her. We got word from Earth. Your family knows you are safe. We will have you home within 3 days. Home, Sophie had not dared to believe she would ever see home again. Now it was real, possible, close enough to almost touch. Thank you, she whispered. No, sweetheart. Thank you for being brave enough to survive. Thank you for holding on until we could find you. Sophie looked at the ships outside again. Thousands of people who came to save 12 kids they had never met. She did not fully understand it yet. Maybe she never would. But she knew she was loved, protected, safe. And that was enough. Warlord Draxus surrendered himself 5 hours and 47 minutes after David's ultimatum. He walked into the Galactic Council chamber wearing simple clothes instead of his military armor, his claws bound in restraints that were mostly symbolic. He could have broken them easily, but everyone in the room knew he would not try. The fight had gone out of him. Ambassador Reed watched from the human delegation section as Krellian guards led their former leader to the center of the chamber. Around the room, representatives from 87 species watched in silence. This moment would be remembered for generations. The day a major galactic power fell not through military conquest, but through moral judgment. The chief arbiter of the galactic court, an ancient being from a species so old they had no name in common language, spoke in a voice that resonated through everyone's translator. Warlord Draxus of the Krellian Empire, you stand accused of ordering and permitting crimes against 12 human children. How do you respond? Draxus looked around the chamber, at the alien faces watching him, at the human delegation where David sat with absolute stillness, at the holographic displays showing the children's injuries in clinical detail. Guilty, he said simply. I knew what was being done. I permitted it. I used those children as political tools. I am guilty of everything you might charge me with. The admission sent ripples of surprise through the chamber. War criminals usually fought the charges, tried to justify their actions, blamed subordinates. Draxus did none of that. Why did you permit this? The chief arbiter asked. Because I thought humans were weak, because I believed their emotional attachment to their young made them vulnerable. I was taught that caring too much about individuals made species easy to manipulate. Draxus looked directly at David. I was wrong, catastrophically, completely wrong. Explain. Humans do not care about their children because they are weak. They care because it makes them strong, strong enough to burn down empires, strong enough to sacrifice thousands of their own people, strong enough to face any threat, any cost, any consequence. Draxus's voice held something that might have been respect. I built an empire on conquest and fear. They built a civilization on protecting what they love. When those two forces collided, only one could survive. The trial continued for 3 days. Evidence was presented. Witnesses testified. The 12 children spoke about what had been done to them, their small voices carrying across the chamber with devastating clarity. Sophie described asking for water and having her arm broken. Marcus explained trying to protect the others and being beaten unconscious. Amy showed the scars from cigarette burns. Every species in the council heard what happened, saw the results, understood exactly what crime had been committed. The verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. Draxus was sentenced to life imprisonment under council supervision. The Krellian government was dismantled and rebuilt under strict oversight. Reparations were established. Justice was served. But David knew the real impact went far beyond one warlord's punishment. 6 months later, the Galactic Council passed new legislation with unprecedented unanimous support. The Protection of Youth Act made harming any species' children a crime punishable by total economic sanctions and potential military intervention by Council forces. It had enforcement mechanisms that previous laws lacked. Real consequences. The Chiton ambassador approached David after the vote. This law exists because of what your species did, because you were willing to go further than anyone thought possible. We did what was necessary, nothing more. You destroyed an empire over 12 children. You lost thousands of your own people. That is considerably more than necessary by any rational calculation. David looked at the insectoid being. There is nothing rational about loving your children enough to protect them at any cost, but there is also nothing more fundamentally important to civilization. If we cannot protect our most vulnerable, what are we? The ambassador clicked its mandibles thoughtfully. Other species are adopting human protocols for child protection, increasing security, changing laws, all because they saw what happens when humans perceive a threat to their young. Good, that means some good came from this nightmare. 3 months after the trial, Sophie Martinez stood in her family's kitchen on New Houston Colony. The settlement had been rebuilt after the Krellian attack, new buildings rising from the ashes of the old. Her mother was making breakfast, her father was reading news reports, her little brother was complaining about his homework. Normal, safe home. Sophie's arm had healed completely. The bone regeneration therapy worked perfectly, leaving no trace of the fracture. But sometimes she still felt phantom pains where it had been broken. The doctors said that was normal. Trauma left marks that took time to fade. She attended therapy twice a week, talking about her experiences with a counselor who specialized in helping children process traumatic events. Marcus and Amy and the others had similar sessions. They were all healing, slowly but steadily. But they also understood something most children never learned. They knew exactly how much they were loved, how far people would go to protect them. They had lived through proof that they mattered. Sophie's art therapy sessions produced dozens of drawings. Some showed the dark times, the scary moments, the pain and fear. Her therapist said getting those images out of her head and onto paper helped process the memories. But her favorite drawing hung on the refrigerator now. It showed dozens of ships in space, all different colors and shapes, flying together. In the corner she had written in careful letters, "Heroes who came for us." Her mother saw her looking at the drawing. "You want to talk about it, sweetheart?" "I was just thinking about how many people came, people who did not even know us. They came anyway. That is because you are worth it. You and every child who needs help. That is what makes us human, Sophie. We protect our own no matter what." Sophie hugged her mother tight, feeling safe in a way she had not felt for months. "I want to be like that when I grow up. I want to help people who need it, like they helped us." "Then you will be exactly the kind of person the galaxy needs." Across known space, the effects of what became known as the Shepherd War continued to ripple outward. Species that had previously treated their young as economic assets or military resources began changing policies. Laws were strengthened. Protections expanded. Cultural attitudes shifted. Because humanity had demonstrated a simple truth: there are some lines that should never be crossed, and if you cross them anyway, there will be consequences. David Reed returned to Earth after his time as Council ambassador ended. He visited the memorial that had been erected for those who died during the Shepherd War. 2,347 names carved in stone, each one a person who volunteered to save 12 children they never met. Someone had left flowers at the base of the memorial, fresh ones, replaced regularly by people who wanted to remember. David added his own, a simple gesture of respect. Admiral Grace Thompson found him there. They stood in silence for a while, remembering. "Do you think it was worth it?" Grace asked quietly. "All those lives for 12 children." David thought about Sophie drawing pictures of rescue ships, about Marcus learning to trust adults again, about Amy's burns healing and her smile returning, about 12 kids who got to go home because people cared enough to fight for them. "Ask me that question again," he said, "and I will consider it an insult to everyone whose name is on this wall." Grace nodded. She had expected that answer, hoped for it really. They stood together in the fading sunlight, honoring the memory of people who proved that civilization meant something, that protecting children mattered more than peace, more than prosperity, more than survival itself. The galaxy had learned a lesson it would not forget. Humanity would go to any length, pay any price, accept any consequence to protect their young. And 12 children, who survived a nightmare, knew, with absolute certainty, that they were loved. That was worth everything,